1. After my parents divorced, my mom had a relationship with an abusive man for years. One morning I woke up to her screams again, and as usual I would pull the door open to check up on her. They were in an argument again that turned out to be physically abusive towards my mum. I would stand there and spectate, beg him to stop every time I witnessed it. I always had the hope that he would be less abusive when I show presence, that he would have more mercy with a kid being around. So I sat there in the living room fulfilling my guard dog role for my mum. When I saw our actual dog crawling under the table, she was shaking in fear. Normally I would never have left the apartment when this was happening. I was too afraid that this man would kill my mum when I wasn't around. But to see the dog in such a fear flipped my habits. So I grabbed her by the collar, put the leash on, and walked out. I walked the dog to a big isolated meadow. There was nothing and nobody around us, and a big old oak tree in the middle of it. We got the dog from an animal shelter. She was an old and uneducated dog. There was no way to release her from the leash without her running away immediately. I knew that very well, but I let her free and told her to run away and find a better family. And she started to run. She ran about 100 meters, and I thought I would never see her again. But suddenly she stopped and looked back at me. I was just standing still. She walked slowly back to me and sat down next to my feet. Something happened with me in this moment. I looked up to the old oak tree and felt like the entire world stood still. I felt terrible things I have never felt before but wasn't able to sort them in. I felt paralyzed in time. I was caught in this horror for an eternity. I must have stared at this tree for quite some time before I woke up again. Because it was dark outside already. The dog was still sitting next to me. Then I only had one question in my mind. Why didn't my mum just take me like I took the dog to run away from this hell? I knew something broke in me forever. I had nowhere else to go than the miserable life I'd just walked away from. So I put the dog on the leash again and went home. Some years later, my mum finally could separate from her abusive partner. We moved out and she even managed to make a small old house our new place. First time in my life I had my own room. I was very good in school and had a lot of nice friends. Everything was actually perfect from that moment on. But with the silence of finally having peace and safety in my own home, I also realized for the first time what actually happened in all those years before. I was sitting at my desk, reading a book for school. There was a phrase about an old oak tree. I remember how my body went into some kind of autopilot mode. I closed my book, left it on the table, and went to bed to sleep. I stayed in bed for some days, unable to do anything. The only thing I could do was to dream. And I dreamt I was the old oak tree, which is looking down on myself. My mum shook me awake, helped me to do basic stuff. I woke up empty. I had no smiles anymore, no tears, no fears, no anger, no wishes. There was just nothing left. I was a shell without a ghost. I developed a very bad depression with suicidal thoughts, and my mum was forced to take me to a hospital where I stayed for several months to recover. Later in my life, I asked my mum if she remembers me lying in bed for days back then. She looked confused at me and answered, "They weren't days. You were lying in that bed for an entire year." I was shocked. I never realized that it had been such a long time. I have memory loss for a complete year of my life. The only memory I have was the dream of me being the old oak tree. I'm 31 years old now, and I've never told anyone about this because I am afraid that people would think I'm crazy, especially with my former history of depression. So here I am, thinking about if this had been a very creative mental breakdown that my brain created, or if this was somehow a glitch in the Matrix. I thought maybe some different time spans of my life got connected through this old oak tree, a tree that acted like a portal. I had so many emotions dropping down on me, but I physically stood below it, staring up, and experienced my first blackout. Time felt like an eternity. Years later, during my depressive dreams in which I was a tree looking down on myself, I felt nothing, and time rushed by in an eye blink. I was lying in bed for an entire year. 2. On a Wednesday, April 4th, I was riding my bike around. It was a nice day out and I wanted to be somewhere else instead of my home. I'm going around the block when I arrive at an intersection. I'm just casually waiting for the light to turn green when something in my head tells me to look left. I'm weirded out, and I look to my left. A 2000s Ford Explorer is barreling down the street. I notice in my peripheral vision that a 2000s Lexus has ran the red light. It feels like forever when suddenly the Ford Explorer struck the silver car and T-boned it. The Lexus spins around and strikes me off the bike and into the rear window. The last thing I hear is the sound of my bones cracking. But that didn't happen. When I looked up, I was a block away from the accident. The crosswalk light was indicating that I should go, and I crossed. This time I got to the intersection, I stopped my bike behind this pole. This time the same accident happened. But instead of the car striking me, it strikes the pole. At that time I'm shocked and in fear of never being let out of the home. I never told my parents and just lived on with my life. I forgot about most of it and just thought it was a bad dream. I just dismissed it as I couldn't find any clues if there was an accident. I came back the following Friday and there was no glass and no car parts to indicate that anything happened. But everything changed today. From the 6 years in between the accident, it popped in and out of my head. I still doubted there was an accident. But this is where it gets weird. I remember the car from the accident, that the license plate of the car T-boned started with DWK. In my 6 years of going around New York, I have never seen a DWK ever. Even though DWK license plates should be seen at least one more time, I had never seen it again. Today as I'm walking home, I see a black Jetta with DWK plates. I thought, I've only seen those once before. Oh yeah, the dream. By this point, I feel weirded out and confused. I stopped walking with friends and took a break even though I wasn't tired. I'm now almost a block away from my home. I live in a very populated urban area and my neighborhood often has multiple vehicles. I was looking across the street when I noticed all the cars around me were silver Lexuses. Although my neighbor's new silver Lexus NX300 and silver Lexus RX350 was there, none of my other vehicles were there. Not a single of the other neighbor's cars was there. To make this even more crazy, my Jaybird X4s suddenly disconnect. I just purchased the pair last week and it was very odd. While looking to the left as I'm crossing the street, I notice a 2010 to 2012 silver Lexus ES350 on the next block, and a 2013 to 2015 Lexus ES350 idling on the side. Both vehicles were heavily tinted, which is quite odd in New York. I keep on looking at the vehicles to the left when suddenly the same exact voice tells me to look to my right. Although I had just checked to my right before, another silver Lexus RX350 F Sport had appeared. There was no possibility this car could appear that fast in that moment. Also, I was literally inches away from being hit. The driver didn't even appear to notice me and kept on driving. As I crossed the street, the neighbors' cars had just magically appeared. The Ford F-150s, CR-Vs, etc. had just magically appeared, although they weren't there before. 3. These phenomena are probably the creepiest and most terrifying things I have ever experienced in my life, and likely won't be challenged. Ready? Here's some backstory. Summer 2018. Out with mates at a club all night. They had a couple of glasses of vodka, but I had cider. I had it posted all on Snapchat at the time. Now for my side of the story. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday when I got home, and it's safe to say I was healthy and fine after one can of cider. I settled down into bed and went to sleep. I awoke on midday Thursday. I had a massive headache and was in hospital in those comfy, retracting beds. I can confidently say I was totally lost and confused as hell at this moment in time. I immediately thought I had passed out from drinking somehow, but it turns out there was way more to it than I had first thought. My father's side of the story. At around 4:30ish on Tuesday, my father awoke to a massive crash downstairs. He ran downstairs to see me shaking, not aggressively like you would in a seizure, equally not as soft as you would when shivering. I was almost like a fish out of water in slow motion. Long bursts of stretching like someone being hit with a defibrillator. Then suddenly I stopped dead still. My father said to me when I came to on Thursday that I was fully awake but something seemed off straight away. He initially thought I had a seizure. I had blood in my head and out of my ears despite not hitting anything too. He apparently asked me, back to Tuesday now, for my name, where I was, what I was doing, age, general questions. I didn't answer correctly. He starts getting concerned as I start talking weirdly, and with a different tone, and all sorts of other complex language things I don't really understand. He gave me painkillers and called the doctors for advice. I went to hospital, and then woke up on Thursday. That's all he knew. Now for the details that make this event truly bizarre. I don't recall any of this, literally. Not one single moment. However, my father tells me, once he heard me make a strange noise downstairs, he then heard me saying, "Where the fuck am I, Dad?" and immediately making the same noise, returning to the previous state. The strangest aspect, though, is that I was half aware of everything that was occurring, but couldn't say or do anything, because I am still sure to this day I was in some sort of altered consciousness, in a different realm. I was somewhere I don't know. I'd never seen it. Nothing was out of the ordinary besides the location. I felt real, I could touch objects and sense things, people acted as if they knew me, although I couldn't pick up what language they were speaking. Honestly, this felt more real than a lucid dream, which I've had many of, and I know they feel genuine. So guys and girls, can anybody help explain this for me? Now for the second one, more backstory. I have been told by professional doctors that this was something they had never seen and cannot explain. Nobody understands what happened. My ECG results perplexed some in a major way. I was showering at the time of this event. My view, I did the shaking thing again. This time I passed out and woke seconds later. Spoiler alert, I don't remember being conscious here. I continued on with my day as normal until I shook again, and this time I did the bleeding thing again too. What next? You guessed it, hospital. Again. Basically guys, this was the same sort of happening, but the difference is here that I was normal when I had supposedly woken for the second time in the ambulance. Nothing seemed off. Except during the whole experience when I woke up on the hospital beds again. My consciousness was still getting on with a normal day as if nothing had happened. I had showered, dressed, and gone to school as if it was, again, reality. I hope someone can help explain this one. It doesn't come across as scary, but trust me, when you feel like you're in two places at once but can't act in either, it is frightening. 4. So this started today. Australian date set out, 8/4/2019. A few hours after my boyfriend and I had woken up, we had to get ready for a house viewing that he had, and then make our way to a viewing of a movie that was happening on our college campus. So the day starts off fairly uneventful, like any other day. Though once we were on the train going up to campus, things started to feel a little strange. But not so strange that it was something to note. It started off with small things. While sitting on the train, my partner and I had taken out a Kit Kat. It was a new one that neither of us had tried before, called Caramel Pretzel. Now, if I'm honest, the chocolate tasted nothing like caramel or pretzel and instead tasted like popcorn. Anyway, we discussed this fact for a while, and eventually I looked out the window. Keep in mind, the trains here in Perth, Western Australia, do not have advertisements on the outside of our trains. But I saw the "have a break, have a..." I didn't get the chance to read the rest, as the train it was on was going in the opposite direction of ours. I was uncomfortable by the sighting and asked my partner if he had seen it. He said no, but laughed and made a joke about parallel universes and universe jumping. We laughed it off as a weird coincidence. But as our day went on, more coincidences kept happening, including I won a raffle for something. Out of my 20 years, I have not won a single raffle, no matter how small the pool of people had been. 2. My boyfriend was trying to prove a point to me, and in the distance, further down the train, a man started singing, "I know that's the truth, you know that's the truth." 3. When I arrived home later that night, I noticed not a single car at my home. There are usually at least one, since we have 3 cars and only 2 people with licenses. 4. My dog, who barks almost as soon as anyone pulls up into the driveway, did not make a sound, not even when I was inside. 5. I had the same Uber driver. I've never had the same Uber driver, and I catch an Uber almost every week. Plus, I live in a small city. But the weirdest one my boyfriend and I both experienced. We were on our way back from campus. We've made this trip every day, to and from campus, so we know the train line pretty well. However, we were about 35 minutes into our train ride when the train stopped. But it stopped at a random spot in the tracks. As we were stopped, my partner and I were confused and looking out. The train was completely quiet, despite there being 20 to 25 people in our cart alone. Not even the train guards spoke as they were looking outside. The only people talking was myself and my boyfriend. So we chose to look outside to see where we were, but when we looked out, there was nothing. It was just completely black. Not even a silhouette of trees, which normally you can see the whole way along the train line. The stop was momentary, and only lasted for about 5 minutes before we resumed the rest of the trip. But things that are slightly off have been occurring ever since. 1. The sign that normally says Perth instead read Perai. 2. A street lamp that I see most nights is now blue instead of the normal yellow-white. Things are off for me and my boyfriend. I'm not sure what's happening. If you think you have any ideas, please comment. If something similar has happened to you, let us know. Signed, a confused guy. 5. I seem to have several doppelgangers kicking around the globe in various places. At least that's what I'm told by people. I was told by a friend from Norway that he knows a semi-professional snowboarder that looks exactly like me. There are people around England and Wales who allegedly look a hell of a lot like me in most ways, at least, to the people who have met them and me. There are only a limited number of facial configurations, I suppose, so that's not incredibly glitchy. Not necessarily so, anyway. I am also recognized by people that I've never met, who then seem a bit put out when I don't remember them. That could just be down to my terrible memory, though. There was one occasion where it got really, really weird, though. I had been working and traveling around the UK. This was the same summer where my friend and I had been talking about sleep paralysis. In fact, this is how we met via the job, and it just turned out we were at the same university. 15 or more years later, we're still friends, and he was at my wedding. Anyway, I digress. My team and I were in Scotland. I forget the name of the town. It's the dock town that featured an outlaw king. The one where the riot happens. It's quite picturesque, or at least it was back then. We had finished working and we were having a well-deserved pint in one of the local pubs. It was really nice with lots of wood panelling, one of those small-town pubs the UK is kind of renowned for. Since we arrived, I'd felt the eyes of one of the customers on me, a blonde girl, not bad looking at all, but I was a little bit unsettled to find her just staring at me any time I happened to glance in her direction. In all honesty, I thought I might have pulled. That got lucky for our non-UK listeners. What can I say? I was a 20-something university student with one thing on the brain, and it wasn't my studies. Anyway, eventually it's my round and I go up to the bar to order. This blonde girl, you know what, I don't even remember her name, she plucks up the courage to approach me when I'm alone at the bar and says, "Can I tell you something?" "Of course," I reply, thinking the whole time that I'd have to meet my team in the morning, poor me, and I'd get ready for the flirting. "You look exactly like my boyfriend." "Wait, what?" Pardon me? I'm a bit taken aback. That wasn't what I was expecting. "Yeah, I'm really sorry." She's actually apologetic at this stage. "I'm sorry for staring at you, but you look exactly like my boyfriend. He's dead." "Oh," I say rather pathetically. I'm still at a loss. "I'm sorry. I'm curious now, was he really like me?" "Yes," she replied, "exactly." During the following conversation, she tells me that 1, her boyfriend was a dead ringer for me facially. Unintentional pun. Same build, same facial expressions. 2, he was from West Belfast, but she met him in Australia. Interestingly, I would later live in Australia for a couple of years, but at the time I didn't know that. I'm from West Belfast. 3, he used to surf Portrush, north coast of Ireland. Not many surfers from Belfast, you know. I used to surf in Portrush too. Surfing was one of his reasons for going to Australia, and was one of mine later. 4, not just his accent, but his voice completely identical to mine. 5, same age, same birthday. 6, same quick sense of humor. We found this during the conversation. 7, he's a kicker, same name. Same first name anyway. I can't genuinely recall if the last name was the same. Anyhow, me and my unknown twin had never met each other. I think this girl said she'd been with her boyfriend for 5 years before he died. It was all very weird and more than a little bit sad. Certainly by the end of the conversation, sleeping with her was the last thing on my mind. If I recall correctly, we even discussed it. I think she said she'd thought about it, but it was just far too weird a thing to conscience. And I agreed. In any case, I never saw her again. Hugely surreal experience, though. She was actually volunteering a lot of the information about her boyfriend. She wasn't just confirming things that I happened to mention. If it was a prank, it was an extremely unlikely and elaborate one. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Glitch in the Matrix Stories, episode 104. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories and sent in stories for use in this video. Thought I wasn't going to get this one done, but I did remember I had I've got quite a few Glitch in the Matrix stories from subscribers. A lot of them are a bit on the short side, so it's just a matter of finding the right place for them to go, and I will. But for this video I needed one about 4 minutes, and thankfully the final story there, the author sent me a number of stories, and there's a couple of glitch ones in there. I'll probably use the next one in next week's video, actually. So, save the video is what it did there. So, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.